From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Ticats Today with Steve Milton.
It's Wednesday, May 1st, May Day. This is Ticats Today, and I'm Steve Milton. Well, the annual CFL National and Global Player Drafts, where teams stock their non-American talent for the present and the future, was held Tuesday night, and the Tiger Cats secured the exclusive rights to 8 of them. Every one of them from Canadian University sports programs, and another 2 in the global draft, so 10 in all. Ed Hervey and I, the general manager, we discussed very forthrightly the Ticats draft class and why they went with an offensive lineman with the first pick instead of perhaps a receiver or a linebacker, which most analysts thought they might do. And then we take a look at their number 2 pick, defensive lineman Luke Brubacher, who hasn't played much football because he was a boxer. Also, Ed looks ahead to what he sees as the most important factors when training camp opens. Here to join me in a discussion about the drafts is Ticats General Manager Ed Hervey. Hi, Ed, and welcome back to the Ticats Audio Network. First, your birthday is Saturday, so many happy returns. And
thank you very much.
And speaking of returns, you picked up 8 first-year players yesterday, 10 actually if you count the global draft. It was a long day, and you were back in the office early this morning. So, as we say in the sports industry, you had to sleep fast.
Yeah, no, it was a very busy process for us, and just really excited about the way yesterday turned out. But as you know, as we're getting closer to camp, sleep is at a minimum these days,
right.
With just all the things that we have coming up. But we're really just excited about the upcoming season and looking forward to our rookie camp that's beginning next week.
Well, speaking of that, this is really kind of apropos to nothing, but after a very busy and I think what most observers would consider very productive winter for you and the rest of the Ticats personnel department, and with rookies reporting to training camp in a week, do you consider the draft, and there were 2 of them yesterday, the end of the off season or the start of the new season?
I believe that the off season is somewhat continuous, right? Because it kind of goes through the draft. And then there's still a process of players that will still be coming in. There's still some late signings that will go on and take us not only to rookie camp, but probably all the way through. And then, as you know, there's the odd guy who we've been waiting on, who's probably looking for to get his passport numbers. So they'll get the guys signed all the way through until we actually set the roster going into the season. But to answer your question, I think it's a combination of both. I think for the personnel guys like Drew Alamang, who has done an excellent job with our Canadian draft. His sights are set now on East-West game and looking at next year's prospects. And on the American side, we're still in the process of just tweaking and fine-tuning the roster going into training camp. So, we're excited around here about where we're headed with that.
Let's could you give me the formal numbers, Ed? That I mean, there's 2 parts to this. There's the rookie camp, and then there's cut down, and then the formal camp that starts on Sunday, week Sunday. What are the numbers there? What do you have to get down to, or have in camp? What are the numbers that you can have there?
Well, with rookie camp, and this is excluding the non-counters like the draft picks and stuff.
Right.
We're allowed 100 players on the roster.
Right.
Okay, and then prior to training camp, those numbers have to get down from 100 to 85.
Right.
And then we have 85 for the first couple of days of training camp, and then that has to get down to 75.
Right.
And then we have 75 players through camp until we set the roster toward the end there. And within that time, guys get banged up, players are jumping ahead, and sometimes guys are not meeting expectations, so we're allowed to fill the roster in there. But the general hope is that the 75 players that we're going into that first preseason game with, which excluding the non-counters,
right,
is more than enough for us to get through and have guys not get overworked.
Right.
But again, it's a process where in some cases, like a guy like myself, I'd love to have the 85 all the way past the first preseason game, just to ensure that we have the numbers and guys are it saves the legs of your veterans and the guys that you're going to come to rely on during the regular season. But so be the case.
Okay, yeah, and especially, I mean, you have to get up so quickly for a game, right? I mean, that's actually been one of the complaints over the years that you hardly have any chance to look at anybody, especially if you're a team rebuilding any parts of your team. Anyways, let's go to that. Well, you mentioned non-counters, and that would include I think all 10 players that you got yesterday, the 8 in the national draft and the 2 in the global draft. So let's get to that draft. I'll just summarize a little bit. You came out of it with 2 offensive linemen, 2 defensive backs, 2 linebackers, a running back, and a defensive lineman. And then earlier in the day, you took a punter and a tight end in the global draft. You had pretty well everything covered there, Ed. How would you characterize your class of 2024 overall?
There's when we look at it, there's versatility within the group. We were kind of spread throughout the roster. Different areas require different approaches. When you talk about offensive linemen, we'll start there. That's the bread and butter and the core of the CFL. Is to ensure that you have offensive linemen, national offensive linemen who can project as guys who can play. One of them has the ability to snap, is a center, and when you have an experienced offensive line, for those times when you want to give guys like Rev or David a day off, the practices still must go on, right? And to try to preserve the health of our older players, we have always keep that in mind. But with Nate, we see him as a guy that at some point he's going to be ready to play. And if was asked to play this year, we believe as a department and a staff that he's one of the players that's most ready to play if called upon. So with that, every week we're going to have 3 offensive linemen starting for us. And as we all know, and as you know, Steve, you've covered this league a very, very long time, is that those guys are not walking around the malls waiting for jobs in the CFL. Those guys are on rosters or they're in some capacity with the team. And with us, we felt like getting the best of the group is important, and then also a specific skill set because not everyone is able to snap, and we just want to make sure that we're able to cover that. And I think last year it was a lesson for us in that department when David got a little nicked up that we probably felt like we should have a guy around that can snap and give him a day to rest if needed.
Now, when you said Nate, you're talking, of course, of Nathaniel Dumoulin-Duguay. Am I right about that? And
absolutely.
And now he's listed as a left. First of all, you can almost never go wrong with choosing a guy out of the belt. They're usually pretty well coached, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. They do a really good job, fantastic job over there. Glenn does an excellent job with his roster, but their offensive line as a whole, they're just well coached,
right.
And they come into the league with an understanding of the professional game, the understanding of things that they're going to face. The game isn't overly too fast for them as they adjust to the game, just with the difference of kind of the level of players that are in front of them. I think that's the one thing, but they seem to be more inclined to get up to speed over the years. So the reputation of their organization over there and their university and their players.
Now, he's a left tackle, so that. But I'm assuming that, as you say, it's a middle 3 you're looking at, and you think he can play through all 3?
We feel that definitely could play both guard positions if asked, and in a pinch, the tackle position. Obviously, it takes a little adjusting, but we feel like he's a guy that shows the versatility to be able to do those things, and the upside of that. Obviously, learning the game, adjusting to the speed of the game. But when you'll hear this thrown around sometimes, guys who are most ready to play,
right,
or the closest. When you're able to say that about a player, it gives you a little bit of confidence knowing that given the opportunity, or in a situation if you're forced to play, be it injury or sickness or something, that you have a guy that can do it, and we feel confident that if in a pinch in his first year, we feel that he could do that.
Right.
The tackle is a little different animal out there, but again, when we're evaluating players and we're talking about the versatility and the skill sets that they bring to the roster, it is important to kind of go line by line uh, where they can help us if needed.
Right.
And Nathaniel he checks all the boxes with that for us with that first pick, and we quite honestly we were quite surprised that he would be available to us at that pick because he was very highly rated on our board. First offensive lineman, obviously, but he was the second-rated player on our board as far as who might be available to us and most ready to play.
And I mean, you already have had a couple of guys, so it looks like there's going to be a little bit of battle there. I assume, given the way the roster's shaking down, that, and this is what you've done the last couple of years, is dress two Canadian linemen in case there's issues, but there's the two that were here last year, other guys from other draft classes coming in, and then Nathaniel as well. So that should be a pretty good battle there in training camp.
Absolutely. A competition is extremely important for teams to have success, and the competition is going to breed the best players to play at their best, and for the young players who have the potential to really get up to speed. I think that's going to be a benefit to what we're trying to do here with our football team specifically along the offensive line. I think that they're going to. Coach Gibson does an excellent job with the offensive line play. I think we got great guys up front that are returning here, and we have a high expectation of our young players that are coming in, and some players that we've signed during the offseason to come in and compete at a high level. We want our offensive line to be basically to lead us. Right. We're gonna the attitude that our offensive line brings into games will determine our success on offense, and we feel like we have a very strong group in that department, but we'd like to bring some young guys along to develop the same mentality that our veteran group has.
I'm talking about development, Ed. Very interesting choice in the second round. Really interesting choice at number 16 in Wilfrid Laurier's defensive lineman, Luke Brubacher. One of the coaches at Laurier is former Ticat Mike Daly, who was a main panelist last night on Ticats Audio Network's 2-hour draft show, and he was, as you can understand, ecstatic about the choice. Brubacher didn't really play football until he arrived in Waterloo because his main sport was boxing, believe it or not. And could you expand on what he brings or will bring to this team? You already have some pretty decent, if fairly young, Canadian depth at defensive line in returnees, Mason Bennett, Mo Diallo, and Anthony Federico. So what about that choice? Is that a future? Is that a development choice?
It's a little bit all of the above, right? We believe that Luke possesses some physical traits that you just can't get, and if you pass him up, there wasn't another guy in the draft like him.
Right.
Athletically, physically, again, and we're a league that has to take responsibility in developing our national players, and anyone who has the physical abilities that Luke has, we think that in that time that we have him, that we can get the most out of him. As far as ready to play, yes, he's raw in the sense of playing defense, but we feel that as a contributor on special teams, that he will be able to help us there. And not only that, it was very important for me as when we were discussing our rosters that size. We need we feel like we need more size. We need to have more physical matchups to our advantage. And 6'5", 245, 46 pounds, and runs 4.7. Those are the type of body types that you need to have around the building, not only for special teams and do special teams matchups, but to develop for future opportunities that could come with ratio opportunities down the line. Right? We also we went into this wanting opportunities to have some ratio flexibility.
Right.
And with Mason Bennett on on our roster, and Mo Diallo, if a push came to shove where we ever had to go to that position for a start or two, or finish a game or do anything, having those defensive linemen around are always a benefit, just as it is with the offensive line, just on a different scale, because special teams component plays a little bit more of a factor in it with guys that size.
I'm thinking about boxing, and when you talked about special teams and especially for linemen on either side of the ball, footwork is in all sports, footwork is an incredible part of everything on learning. And I would think a boxer understands footwork as well as, or maybe better than anybody. The concept of footwork. So,
absolutely. No, I would absolutely agree with you there. And I would take it a step further and say also use of hands.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And understanding, right? So, those are some of the things that, that Luke will bring to the table as far as understanding as an athlete,
right?
Being able to move and maneuver on the field. And I think that those things will give him the advantages that will help him exceed as he's developing with us, where he may lack in experience. That is what our coaching is for. That's what our environment, that's what we are here to do, is to help develop young players who have the potential and who have, as I mentioned earlier, measurables that you don't find every day.
Right.
And if you pass up on that guy and you take someone that's smaller or another position, you may not see anyone like that again. And quite honestly, in our opinion, he was the unique one in that particular area of the draft. Whereas, the later rounds, we felt like we can address some of the concerns that we had, later, because there was more depth at other positions, not quite anything like it was with Luke and what he could bring to our roster.
Well, the draft, as we talked about earlier, and you answered part of this question in earlier answers there, Ed, but the draft's a slippery concept because there's so many moving parts and things change by the minute, before, during, and not after, but right up to even to the last round trades, all of those kinds of things. But I think a lot of analysts, including, and I admit this myself, thought that given the acquisition of on the offseason of important Canadian linebacker Jordan Williams, who's a ratio breaker, you might be looking at a linebacker in the opening couple of rounds. Now, you may have answered that as part of your previous answers, but did you look at that and did that come into it, or was it was about the specific player you took in that situation?
No, and I'm glad you asked the question. I want to be as fully transparent as I possibly can be with the audience here. Is that when we went through our mocks and we talked about it, there was only one player in that, we'll say in that first round, that we felt that we would not pass on.
Oh, right. Okay.
And if it came to it, right, we felt that with respect to the linebacker, we felt DeBlanco was going first.
Right.
Okay. Outside of being faced with the challenge of DeBlanco and some of the other guys being there, the way we had our board rated, there was a clump of guys that we felt, if they're available, we're staying at 7.
Right.
And if they're not there, then we will explore the possibility of trading and doing whatever. It takes two teams, right, to make those things happen. But that was the mindset over the last 4 days going into the draft, was all of the mock scenarios.
No receivers except in the global draft. So that leads me to believe you're pretty satisfied with your home core after signing Luther Hakanavau and Brendan O'Leary Orange, both fast and very big, to add to Keandre Smith and Tyler Chernowski and maybe some others. So that fair that you were happy there? But you did take one. You took a tight end in the global draft.
Yeah, I think with the receiving core, we tried to address many of those issues, those concerns during free agency.
Right.
And then with respect to the draft, we were looking at the roster from a special team standpoint, the offensive line, and just just the best players that we could get,
right,
based on how we're looking to develop our roster moving forward. And with respect to receivers, we feel that there's always going to be an opportunity for us to get one.
Right.
When time comes, like there, I don't want to say that receivers are a dime a dozen on the cast, but there's more of them to be had when needed. Whereas when we're talking about teams and getting more physical and getting long, getting more size and more athleticism in areas that are going to take up a third of the game, we want to be able to have matchup advantages, as I mentioned earlier, with respect to special teams and being able to provide depth on the defensive side in some areas. But I want to go back quickly to the part with the linebacker versus, the old lineman. And, Nate Dunn, he's the one that when faced with that opportunity between the linebacker and the offensive line, we had went through that scenario 24 times in our mock sessions and all the things that we discussed. And anyone who knows this league and understands how we build rosters and recognize that the offensive line, especially good offensive linemen, are just too hard to pass up, even if you'd say, hey, there's a roster need, because the way that the rules are set up now with 25 snaps, the veteran American rules and all those different things, we can kind of get by with the rules that way, having a guy like Mason Bennett on the roster and things you can get by. But passing up on good offensive linemen is just, it doesn't work for you in the short term, and it definitely doesn't work for you in the long term, because as you know, Steve, like when you're looking to get an offensive lineman during free agency, the price points go up and up and up. So,
and that costs you somewhere else. People don't understand that, and this is the tightest salary cap league in the world.
Absolutely.
People don't understand that for every dollar you have to pay there, you're losing a dollar somewhere else, which could cost you 1-2 players.
Absolutely. So with that, you also have to, in the draft process, at least from the management side of it, I take an approach of looking at what 2025 could possibly look like as well and beyond. So when you start talking about offensive line play being the core of how a lot of teams are built, especially on the offense, given that we have to play with three. We usually play with three. If you can get to four, that's even better. But with our roster is three. But you have to have players that back those guys up.
Right.
And with that being said, you don't want the drop off to be so significant that you're trying to find that player elsewhere. So I just wanted to make sure that I was able to answer that for the fans who were wondering about the linebacker versus the offensive line. Whereas any team that I've ever been involved with and looking forward to ever working with, your offensive line is going to always be critical and priority because of how important they are. And we have mechanisms within the roster rules that allow us to get by with substitution if we did not take a player, a linebacker in this particular draft.
At some point, we'll get you back on to talk only about how because there's so many different categories you have to do players on. So we'll and it's very confusing, and even to a guy like me, it's been around forever. So I can't imagine to the casual fan. So I appreciate the transparency on that, Ed, because it's important to know those kinds of things and to be able to ask the hard question and to know that you're going to answer it. So every player played U Sports that you took in the draft, and that mean anything? And does it mean anything that the first three were from the East and the final 4 or 5 were all from the Western schools, 2 each from Alberta and 2 from UBC? Is that just the way it shook down?
Yeah, I think as we've gone through our draft board and ranking the players and going through all the conversations that we've had over we started this back in January all the way till now, and in the final days of actually putting the board together, it wasn't whether which school they were from. It was the best players for our roster and how they lined up within the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with the draft and other teams selecting, it fell that way. But we're we didn't draft anyone that we had to reach on. We didn't draft anyone that we had second thoughts about. Every player that fell to us, we felt very comfortable taking. School didn't matter. It was specific to what we were looking for and how we wanted to build our roster.
Right. Okay. Globally, you chose punter Nick Constantinu out of Texas A&M, Johnny Manziel's school, in the first round, and Thomas Yasmin, a tight end from Utah, both in the second round. And they're both Australians. In fact, all the kickers and punter chosen yesterday, and I think there were 8 of them, maybe 9, were Australian. Can you discuss those two a little bit? Yasmin, in effect, was the only receiver that you picked up in the 10 choices yesterday.
Yeah, I think with respect to the tight end, I mean, we just saw something in him that, we see unique and would like to explore if the opportunity arose where he came to Canada. We're all about developing players, and again, we see guys athletically, and you see these guys on film, and you see the things that they can do, and we feel like, as far as player was concerned, and when you start rating the players, and you say you want to take the best players available for your roster, he fell into that category. And if he shows up and he ends up in camp with us, I can assure you that we will find a way to explore all the talents that he has, and to see if it can fit what we're doing, and if it adds to something that we're trying to do, then it would be a success on that end. But with the global program, we also want to make sure that we're fully supportive of the global program. And with that, we took the draft, very seriously as well, right? We're not just drafting guys just to fill the time and just move on. We really see, every bit of any opportunity to bring players into our organization as guys that we want, that believe that can help us. The same with Nick, the punter. It's really looking at some point when they're looking to extend their professional careers, if they're not playing at the NFL level, that they know they have a place and a home, and if they're available to us, we see those players as guys that we want to utilize their skills, not draft because we have to.
Right. Yeah. And now, for you, what are you going to see as the most important indicators or keys early in training camp? And this is my final question, actually. So the next, I guess that's the next big step. Besides, as you say, doing some, and I don't mean to diminish anybody by calling it backfilling, but you are backfilling a little bit here in the next few days to get people in, see who becomes available, all those kinds of things to get it up to your numbers and then down to your numbers. But once training camp starts, for you as the GM, what are you looking for? What are your indicators? What are your keys?
I think when we start training camp, it's really being able as a group. I'm talking coaching staff, personnel staff together, working collectively to be able to identify the players' versatility and their ability to help our roster, and being able to see a vision for guys who we feel that has been brought in that can help the roster. I think there's going to be a lot of competition, and what's most important is in that short amount of time, with the limited amount of reps guys get, is to be able to, I hope the players are able to maximize every rep that they get, but on our end, be able to identify and really get the most out of the rep, and and seeing their opportunities on field, and because the cut downs happen so quickly, right. So and I agreeing and disagreeing sometimes that's just part of it, but the hope is that we're all able to see the players that are standing out the same. Right? The hope.
Rookie camp to me, I realize I said that the last one was going to be my last one. This one is. Rookie camp to me, those 2 or 3 days, that's really important because those guys can get a feel without the pressure of having to be like they'll get a feel for who you are, who the coaches are. Your quarterbacks will be in with them. They'll be playing against peers, and you'll be able to see them that way. I feel it's a really good and important process to allow them to compete fairly, or as fairly as they can be, with people who've had 2 to 12 years in this league that are coming in 3 days later. Obviously, that's fair, right?
Absolutely. With rookie camping, it gives guys a chance to get up to speed and learn what we're doing. They learn the CFL game. Everything's going to be just a lot of classroom time,
right,
with what we're doing, the basis of what we're doing offensively, defensively, and special team. The reps, there's more reps for them,
right,
because the veterans are not there, and there's ample enough time in that short amount of time for us to be able to see who can process, right? Take it from the classroom to the field, back to the classroom. That's what they're being evaluated under. And then obviously I think which is one thing that's most understated in all this is their availability, right? Because you get a lot of guys who come up, they're ready to go. The first day happens, and then the legs give out, they're tired, fatigued. It's just small injuries, and the guy who has extreme amount of talent, but may not have come in camp physically ready to do it, and then the guy who's started slow picks up, and he may have been on the bubble, but an injury ahead of him gets someone else out, and then before you know it, as training camp goes, he ascends, and before you know it, he's found a way on the roster. That's the joy of it. But with rookie camp next week, speaking specifically, the young players are just going to get every opportunity to show what they can do, impress the coaches in the classroom, and then see how far they can take it on the field, and then the opportunity to make plays. And it's going to be a fair process for the players. And when we get into main camp, the hope is that we're able to pick the players who gives us the best chance to have a very exciting roster moving forward.
Okay, well, at this time, I am going to sign off on this, and I really want to thank you for the forthright and really explanatory answers here, and it gives me a lot of encouragement for the rest of the year here, and the kind of discussions we're going to have. So we'll let you get back to work, Ed, and thanks so much for taking the time, and I'm sure we're going to talk regularly during training camp as well. And for those
Absolutely.
of you tuned into Ticats Audio Network, thank you, as always, for spending your time with us. It means a lot. Drop back again for tomorrow's episode, which features a special guest and an announcement. This has been Ticats Today, and I'm Steve Milton.
This has been Ticats Today with Steve Milton. Catch it on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.